It's U of L Today on 93.9 The Phil. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Phil. This is the program that's about all the great stuff and all the great research going on at the University of Louisville. And occasionally we had folks that talk about how to be healthy as well. So you'll hear about that here in just a second. So on the show today, is there a way to de-ice bridges and overpasses in the winter without using salt? A speed school professor is doing the research for the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet on using geothermal energy to de-ice bridges. And you'll hear about that here in a few minutes. And some of you may have thought Romania doesn't exist as a country anymore, but it does. And Kimber Gwyn is headed there in a couple of months. She's one of 11 Fulbright Scholars from UofL this year, and we'll be talking to her. But first, this summer is apparently one of the worst seasons ever for tick bites. Victoria Statler is an assistant professor of pediatrics and infectious diseases at the University of Louisville, and she is here to talk about ticks and how to avoid them and how to deal with them. Victoria, good to see you.
Good. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
So is that true? Is it one of the worst seasons ever for ticks, or you just can't tell?
You know, it's kind of hard to predict. I do know, the CDC just put out a report about a month ago that said tick-borne and mosquito-borne diseases are on the rise. And so, it's definitely something that we're looking at and making sure that we're watching for those diseases when patients come into the hospital and thinking about those things. So.
Is it bad in Kentucky? I mean, are ticks that big of a deal in Kentucky?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, you think about it, everybody has probably been bitten by a tick before. But tick-borne diseases really are rare for the number of tick bites that happen. And so I think we do have a couple of diseases that we do watch for and look for here in Kentucky, specifically Rocky Mountain spotted fever and ehrlichiosis.
And what?
Ehrlichiosis.
Easy for you to say. Don't spell that thing.
The one that I think people worry about a lot is Lyme disease. You hear a lot of information about Lyme disease. And we're not one of the states that sees a lot of Lyme disease. The ticks that carry the germ that causes Lyme disease, we don't see those ticks very frequently here in Kentucky. That's usually more in the Northeast.
In the Northeast. I always think of ticks as being in the South where it's warmer. Is that not true?
Tons of ticks down here too, just a different type of tick. So there's hundreds of species of ticks, and so it just depends on which species you have in which area of the United States, and that determines actually which germs they carry that could cause disease.
So we shouldn't worry about Lyme disease here in Kentucky.
Not really at this point yet, just because we're not seeing those ticks as frequently here in Kentucky yet.
Okay. Rocky Mountain spotted fever, though, can that kill you?
Yes.
Is it likely to kill you, or
it absolutely is a severe disease, a significant disease. So, if it's the summer months and you're around ticks and you've had tick bites, or even if you don't remember a tick bite, but you start to have fever or rash or headache, or just start to feel bad, those are reasons to make sure you see your doctor, and that may be something that they think about.
Okay. And we're again talking to Victoria Statler, who's an assistant professor of pediatrics and infectious diseases at the University of Louisville. We're talking about ticks and tick bites. As a parent, you see your kid running around in a field with tall grass or something like that, or the woods. You always, now at least, you oftentimes check them to see if they've got any ticks on them. But is that something that parents don't do a good job of? Checking your kid for ticks, or are parents gotten pretty savvy to it?
I think most parents know that ticks are a risk when you live in areas like that with close to the woods or near areas of fields of high grasses. But you can have ticks some in urban centers as well. And so what we try to tell people is that if they see a tick on themselves or their pet or their children, to remove it as soon as possible. The best way to prevent tick bites are to not go and run around in the grass. But of course, that's kind of you're not able to do that when you have children, for sure. But to try to avoid those areas, stay in the middle of a trail if you're hiking. You want to wear long clothing, long sleeves, boots, pants. You can spray your clothes with something called permethrin, which will help repel the ticks and other insects off of your clothes. You can spray your skin with things like EPA approved insect repellents that contain DEET and picaridin.
So some of the same stuff you use on mosquitoes.
Correct.
Okay. But when it's 95 degrees outside in Kentucky and it's muggy and you're going on a hike or you're going outside, you're wearing shorts and you're wearing a short sleeve shirt. If you get bit by a tick, can you feel it?
Sometimes you can't. And in fact, ticks actually have a substance in their saliva that sort of numb the area that they're biting into. So they usually don't bite right away either. So they may stick to you first, and it may be a few hours before they actually take that bite. And they do have a substance in there. So some people don't feel a tick bite. But you want to check yourself when you get home and remove the ticks when you get home. And you want to look in darker places, so kind of under your arms, in your ears, behind
Hairline.
your knees. Hairline, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that from when I had little kids and I had to check them. You always look under the hairlines. Was the one place that ticks always find their way.
Yes, I remember growing up, and my mom always had, when we came in for the day, we always had tick check. That's what we called it, and she would comb through our hair and everything. So, yes, those are the places you want to look, and you want to do that to yourself, your pet, and your children.
Well, the pets, I didn't even think about pets. When you're talking about little kids, though, chances are they're just running around, and if they're coming in out of the woods or whatever, and mom's busy, dad's busy, you're not going to necessarily check. Is there any way for a kid to know that they've been bitten if the bite doesn't feel bad or doesn't hurt?
Only if they see the tick, I guess.
Yeah.
Some people,
but if it's in a place on your hairline behind your head,
you may not know. Yeah, you may not know if someone else isn't looking or helping you look. Sometimes, we do recommend trying, if you've been out all day and been in those places, maybe take a bath when you get home or take a shower when you get home. You can take your clothes off and throw them in the dryer and put them on high heat and kind of tumble dry them to get the ticks off of the clothes that could then climb and get onto your skin. So.
Talking with Victoria Statler, Assistant Professor of Pediatrics and Infectious Diseases at UofL. So the biggest question out of all of this interview, how do you get a tick off? There are so many different theories and, wives' tales that you've heard about how to remove a tick. So how do you remove a tick from your skin?
Right. So you want to take some narrow-nosed tweezers. You want to get as close to the skin as possible and around the head of the tick, and you want to pull gently but steady, steady pressure straight up. You don't want to twist. You don't want to yank. You don't want to try to smash it with your fingers or anything like that, because that can cause the tick to, try to bite harder, and it'll be just harder to get out. So you just want to have even pressure, and you don't want to have any parts of the tick left in your skin. So. That
was my question. So if you try to take it off, like with your fingernails or something, you pull off the tick, and you can see that there's parts of it left under the skin. What does that mean, or what harm could that cause?
It may not cause any harm, and really you don't want to dig in there and try to get it out. Just leave it, and eventually it will probably work its way out on its own. And once a lot of the body of the tick is gone, you should be okay.
What's in a tick that causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever, or whatever that long word you said earlier was?
Right. So they're actually caused by a bacteria that the tick has in its stomach, and it's when the tick bites in you, it's trying to feed off of you, so it's getting some of your blood out. But in the process, it also sometimes, this is kind of gross, but spits back into your body, and sometimes those bacteria can come with that saliva. But not all ticks carry those bacteria. And so, there's no way of knowing which tick does and which tick doesn't, but that's kind of how it works.
And so you get the tick off, and you know this bacteria is in your system or under your skin. What should you do? Antibiotic or some antifungal cream? I don't know. What do you put on it?
Right.
Or do you not put anything on it?
Right. So you don't really do anything. There's nothing to do. You want to get the tick off and out if you see it, but you don't necessarily need to go and see your doctor or get an antibiotic. You do want to watch for symptoms of disease, though, and the ones here in Kentucky that you should be looking for again is that fever, rash, headache, muscle aches and pains, maybe a little sick to your stomach. If you have any of those symptoms, that's when you need to see your doctor and make sure that you mention that you remember a tick bite.
Well, that sounds like a cold or a flu. So how do you know that I might have a tick bite instead of just staying home for a couple days from work and I'm okay?
Right. I think in the summer months, if you do have a fever and fever, rash, headache, so it's not that runny nose, congestion, cough necessarily. So it would be a little bit different from a cold. I still think you just check in with your doctor and have them take a look at you. And at that point, if they think that a tick-borne disease is something to worry about, then they may give you an antibiotic at that point. But there's really no role for antibiotics just because I got bitten by a tick.
Final words of wisdom to parents and others and dog owners and cat owners?
Remember that the summer months, there are mosquitoes and ticks out there, and just be cognizant of that, and do what you can to prevent tick bites. And if you start to have symptoms, make sure you see your doctor.
All right, Victoria Statler, appreciate you being on the show. Omid Ghasemi Fare is an assistant professor in the Civil and Engineering Department at UofL, and he's received a research grant to see if geothermal energy might work on bridge ice. Omid, good to see you.
Yeah, Good morning, Mark. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's with Mike. Glad to be here to talk about the research that I got.
Okay, so you got a grant from the Kentucky Department of Transportation to do what? What are you looking at?
So when I joined here, we started to go and meet the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet teams, and we wanted to do some bridge deck de-icing and using some sustainable form of energy like as a geothermal energy so that we can preheat the bridge decks, and then we convinced them finally so that we need this energy and we need to use this technique to de-ice the bridge decks and make it snow-free so that it's create better safe travel for basically the Kentucky peoples.
So right now, I mean, we see the salt trucks, right? There's an ice storm. You know, we got a half-inch of ice on the roads. We see the salt trucks.
Right.
So what's the idea? What's the problem with salt? What are we trying to solve by potentially going with geothermal energy?
That's a great question. So basically the de-icers or salt, or we can say the sodium chloride, which is that's a chemical solutions or de-icers are using regularly, frequently to de-ice the snow, and we do it. The problem is the main problems would be the environmental pollution. Basically, the salts can go through the runoff through the water into the groundwater, and it can pollute our groundwaters, especially here in Kentucky, so that the groundwater level is close to the surface, close to the ground surface. The next one would be basically this reduce the concrete life. Basically, it's deteriorate, or the corrosion of the concrete will be faster. So as you said,
salt
eating,
just eats up the roads.
Yeah, exactly. So it's up the road. So also in the long term, it affects. So we need to repave, and we need to do some repave the surface, and we need some new layers. So that one we need to do it more frequently, maintenance cost. So if we do the system, we are make sure that we don't need that maintenance cost, and also we have not any environmental pollution. And the other hand, the salt, we need to stop the traffic, or they need to do it during the night, or make some safety issues. So that also helped the alls for that one as well.
Gotcha. So what's geothermal energy, and how would you use what's in the ground, energy in the ground, heat in the ground, to somehow get it to a bridge surface or an overpass surface to melt the ice on there? I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah, sure. The geothermal energy, I mean, when it started, the people started to use the geothermal energy, it was more deep geothermal energy. When you go deep, I mean, deep 2 to 3 kilometers into ground, they get basically boiling water or the magma. But what we're talking here is that the shallow geothermal energy, basically the ground temperature is almost constant below 8 feet, 6 feet, below several feet below the ground surface. So what we need to do is that we circulate a fluid inside the ground, so the temperature is higher than the ambient temperature in winter, and it's colder than ambient temperature in summer. So basically, the sources of the energy. So we circulate a fluid, we pass to the ground, get the heat exchange from the ground, we get the energy from the ground and heat the fluid, and then we bring the fluid up, we circulate the fluid in the pavement, and then we heat the pavement basically with the ground.
Well, that sounds like quite a process, because you're talking about, well, first of all, 6 to 8 feet in the ground in Louisville, Kentucky, middle of January. What's the temperature of that ground right there?
The ground temperature basically it depends on the ambient close to the surface. But if you go down below the 6 feet, it's a rule of thumb is basically would be average of the annual temperature in Louisville. So let's say if the average of temperature in Louisville is a 60 Fahrenheit, so we can say the 60 is almost the constant temperature. Yeah,
so it's pretty warm. All right.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the potential for injecting water into the ground, and that the ground warms it up, and then bringing it back out of the ground to spray on the bridges, or what are we talking about here?
So basically, you're using some kind of tube, like as the wet tube that we are washing hands. So the tube comes from bring the water into the house. So PVC tube, HDPE tube, any kind of tube. We just need to circulate the fluid inside the tube in the ground, and then we embed that tube below the surface of the pavement, below the surface of the bridge deck. Then the fluid is passing on basically, and the circulation of fluid heated the whole surface of the bridge deck basically.
Again, we're talking to Omid Ghasemi Fare, who's an assistant professor in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at the University of Louisville, and we're talking about his studies of geothermal energy being used to melt ice on bridges and overpasses. And he's got a grant from the Kentucky Cabinet for Transportation to do that study. It sounds expensive. I mean, it sounds a heck of a lot more expensive than just spraying a bunch of salt on the roads that you got to put, water in the ground, you got to pull it back out, you got to put these tubes inside the bridges, the bridge decks. It sounds expensive.
Yes. At the beginning, basically, this process, it looks expensive. So we shouldn't think about this. Basically, we should look at invest some money. So you're investing some money, and then you're getting the money back in several years. So when you're investing money in a stock, or when you're starting a business. So when you're building a business, you spend a lot of money, but at the beginning you're thinking, oh, I might be successful, and then after a few years, then you'll see, okay, you're getting back the money. So here, that means that we need to invest some money at the beginning, but then we don't need to do a repave, the maintenance cost, the snow removal. So if we have snow, we need to do snow removal. So every year we pay snow removal. And every couple of years, they need to check the pavement if the salts have already eaten the pavement or not. So if you look at the time frame, 7 years, for example, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, for sure we'll getting back more. And then from 5, at first we are negative and in terms of the money. But then after 5 years, you're starting getting money over. And then if you look at the whole period operational life of the bridge, so every bridge here can be 50 years of operational, 100 years. And that time you definitely are getting lots of money back through the system.
So is your study looking at whether this is a practical way to de-ice bridges, or is it looking at the cost-benefit ratio? What is the study looking at?
This study basically is a feasibility study. The Kentucky Transportation Cabinet funded us for a 3 years project. So basically a 3 years and 3 months, almost a 4 years study. So we have started to do a literature review, and then we have started to do a feasibility study. We will start to do a feasibility study that say that with the Kentucky ambient temperature, Kentucky ground condition, Kentucky ground temperature, would this system this system used to de-ice the snow? And then after that, we are going to do a field test, and we are really going to do this system in one of the fields, in one of the bridge, based on the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet KYTC's need. And then we do this, and we will we may basically look at the system for a whole 1 year and try to see if this is a practical issue or not. So then we will basically after that, we are also doing them a cost of basically life cost analysis, so that would be basically.
Right. Is there any place else in the world that is using geothermal heat to heat up water and put it into bridge decks to get the ice off? Is there any place else this is happening?
Yes, exactly. This is happening. Basically, using a geothermal energy, using a sustainable energy, Europe is ahead of us. So in the United States, we have started to do some testing, not using the system, but the system has been used in Europe, especially in Switzerland. And the first bridge was called the Mother of Geothermal Bridge, was built in Switzerland. It's a very big bridge that's fully de-iced using the geothermal energy, and that was built in 2006 or 7, I guess. And they basically considers the initial cost, and they consider the life cost back analysis, and they said that this is successful, basically.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So it's been there for 10 or 11 years. Has it worked? I mean, does it keep in the ice off the bridge in Switzerland?
Yeah, exactly. If you look at the figures, then we will see that definitely before you start to go to the bridge, you see a snow on that, but as soon as you see the bridge deck, there's no snow is seen. It's a very safe basic bridge, and you can just travel very easily and commute basically with a safe commute there. And this system also used for heating and cooling the building as well. So that was the first year started for heating and cooling the buildings. We have in United States a few buildings, but in the Germany, there are a lot. In Switzerland, United Kingdom, they have lots of using the system for other purposes.
I think the Student Rec Center that we built here on campus has geothermal energy heating and cooling part of the building, as I recall.
Yeah.
And the nucleus building downtown as well. So UofL is into this too, trying to figure out ways to do cleaner energy to heat things. So
yeah, exactly. We are using here that's for heating and cooling, but would be a new application for bridge deck de-icing.
Omid Ghasemi Fare from the University of Louisville Speed School of Engineering. Appreciate you being on the show. The University of Louisville had 11 outstanding Fulbright Scholars this year, and that is an outstanding number for the University of Louisville. And one of the makes us one of the top producers of the prestigious scholars in the country. And one of those Fulbright Scholars is Kimber Gwyn. Congratulations, Kimber.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited about it.
Yes, you should be. Kentucky. It's a very high honor to get a Fulbright Scholarship. Why did you decide to even apply for a Fulbright Scholarship?
It actually stems from a past failure that I had. So I graduated college 6 years ago, and my senior year of college, I applied for a Fulbright, didn't get it. My proposal was terrible. It did not go my way, so I honestly wasn't that surprised when it didn't happen. And I was like, okay, well, this just isn't for me. Fast forward, and I thought, well, I knew I wanted to live abroad again, and I thought, well, Fulbright might be the best way to do it. So I applied, met with Dr. Condon, and she essentially said that if I didn't apply, she would hunt me down because she knew where my office was. So,
She does know where your office is.
she does.
So you graduated 6 years ago from
University of Kentucky.
University of Kentucky. So you graduated from UK, then you wound up working at UofL, right?
Right, yeah.
So you're a grad student or you're an employee, or both?
I'm an employee. I initially started as a grad student. I came to UofL in 2014 for my master's in higher education, and about a semester into my grad program, got hired full-time. So I thought, great, I'll make this work and work here. So.
Okay. I guess we ought to go back a second and tell folks, what is a Fulbright Scholar?
So essentially, Fulbright was started in 1946 by Senator William J. Fulbright, and his whole goal of the program was to allow for cultural exchange. He knew the importance of positive international relations between countries and wanted to help not only the states, but our citizens with expanding education, teaching opportunities, and study in different countries. So as a scholar, we're trying to go over there and not only let others know what we are and who we are as Americans, but learn from them as well.
And the deal is what? Do you have to pay for anything, or what do you have to cover?
Not really, which is awesome. We get a stipend. Romania itself, which is where I'm going, they kind of give you a little bit extra. So I'm going to get a housing stipend every month. I'm going to get living expenses more or less covered. So it's pretty much fully funded.
Talking to Kimber Gwyn, who's one of 11 Fulbright Scholars from the University of Louisville in 2018. Romania. Why Romania? Why'd you apply to go to Romania?
So the great thing about Fulbright is it's kind of a statistics game. I chose Romania because you can look at past stats to see how many students applied and how many got it, and they had really good odds. Even though I don't gamble, I did gamble on this. And I also chose it because when I was in college, I had a roommate who was Romanian, and she never really talked about it a whole lot. I only heard her speak Romanian maybe 3 times when she was talking to her grandma on the phone, but it was just really interesting. I knew nothing about the culture or the people really other than her, but Romania also gave preference to students who had a master's degree, who has teaching experience, and who also have interest in international education. So I checked all the boxes.
There you go. So what are you going to do in Romania?
I'll be teaching English at a university, at Cuza University. And the city itself is Iași, but it's spelled I-A-S-I. So
I-A-S-I, and it's pronounced Iași?
Yeah, I've seen it wrong
Okay.
for a very long time.
Okay.
Until I Googled it, and I was like, okay.
Sounds like ISE or something like that.
Yeah, I know. So I was totally wrong.
Okay, and you leave when?
I've got to be in country early October. We're going to have an orientation in country, which is kind of jarring, because we just kind of show up, hope it goes well, get oriented once we're there. But I'm going to go a week early, so I'll be going over there into September.
And what have you learned about Romania since you won the Fulbright Scholarship and said, I'm going to Romania?
Right, yeah. So where I'll be is about 3-ish miles away from Moldova. So that's pretty exciting. I'm going to be so close to a different country as well, even though Moldova is not in the EU, so it takes like 2 hours to get across the border. It's not just open borders, more or less. But in Romanian history, it's pretty long and contentious. So they've had, obviously, communism. They're just getting over that. So their government is really trying to promote itself as, hey, look, now we're a democracy. We're a great place to live, and we want tourists here. We want the economy to boom. They don't use the euro as their currency. They use the lei, which is really cheap, which is also I'm excited about.
Good standard of living, or for you, for Americans anyways, taking the dollar over there,
sure.
right? Good exchange rate. And so you're going to be teaching at a university. So I'm assuming you have to learn Romanian or have to be able to speak at least a little Romanian, which is not a common language.
It is not. But I chose Romania also because you don't have to know it. You don't have to know the language at all to work there. So I'm going to be teaching English. I have tried to learn a bit. I can say mă numesc Kimber, which is my name is Kimber. And I can say mulțumesc is thank you. And that's about the gist of it so far. Slowly but surely, it's a strange language, but thank you, Google, for helping out.
Yeah, and you're going to learn very quickly when you want to order something in a restaurant
Yes.
what the different
sure.
foods are.
Yeah, the pointing will not go so well. I'm going to have to buckle down and learn it, actually, I think.
Okay, so you really want to travel abroad, you said, and so 6 years after graduating, and well, you've gone, what, 2 or 3 years since you've done graduate school, right?
Yep.
So you get to the point where you say, I really want to do this. I failed at it one time, and I'm not good at failure. Was that what drove you?
More or
I
less.
just don't take this well. I've got to succeed.
Yeah, and I just knew U of L too does such a great job with helping Fulbrights. Just Pat Condon, Bethany Smith over in the International and National Scholarships office, they do a fantastic job. They have workshops. They have, quote unquote speed dating where they bring in professors to kind of critique your essays. And so I thought if I'm going to do a Fulbright, now is the time with U of L to help.
Mm-hmm. And what else did U of L provide you, or what did you find really helpful at U of L? You mentioned several things there, but was there one thing that you said, this is going to make my presentation so much better, and I'm so much more better prepared to go for it this time than I was, 6 years ago or whatever
Right.
it was?
I think my supervisor, Virginia Hosono, in the study abroad office really helped. Not only did she encourage me, but she also proofread my essays, and she offered some really good critiques. She was finishing up her PhD at the time, so she was like on the train of thought of, okay, you need to edit this and do this. And without her guidance on my essays, I don't think I would have been nearly as strong of an applicant.
Is there a culture, for lack of a better term, at the University of Louisville of being able to go for these big scholarships and these international opportunities?
I think so. They do a really good job of promoting it to students relatively early on in their college career. I know they do tabling, they do presentations about you should do a Fulbright or, Boren Scholars or critical language scholarships, which are all very prestigious. And it just really encourages students that, hey, this is attainable. We can do this because we've got the support.
Again, we're talking with Kimber Gwyn, who's a Fulbright Scholar from the University of Louisville and an employee at the University of Louisville, is heading over to Romania in October, right? Mm-hmm. You work in the international office at U of L, which helps students figure out, where they want to go study abroad, right?
Yep.
So have you seen any students come through there and say, when they got back from their work or their study abroad, and walk in and say, hey, I want to do this again. How can I do it on the cheap and get somebody else to pay for it? Have you had any of that happen?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, as a study abroad advisor, I often have study abroad alumni come back in and they say, okay, I spent a semester in Spain, or I went to Argentina or Germany. How do I go back? And so that will start the conversation of, okay, here are your options. You can study abroad again, but that means you're paying for it. Or if you want to just get that fully funded like we talked about, then go for a Fulbright, do CLS. There are other opportunities out there that we really encourage them to strive for. And I think study abroad also helps students gain that understanding of, okay, I've already had the cultural immersion. How can I do this again and learn more for a longer period of time?
And what do you hope to learn from your Fulbright experience over in Romania?
So I've studied abroad 3 times in college. I've been to 24 countries now, and I have yet to really spend a long-term period abroad. So that was my main impetus for wanting to do a Fulbright. The longest I was abroad in college was 6 months in Ireland. So I'll be abroad in Romania for 9 months, and I just really want to dive fully into the culture. Mm-hmm. Understand the inhabitants, understand the food. I love food anyway, so I'm going to eat a ton, I can already tell. And just really know what makes the people tick, what's so special about the culture. So that's what I'm wanting to do, and I think I'm really excited to learn about what they can offer.
Do you hope to go work for the State Department or something when you get done? What's your goal? Is there some career goal that you have in mind that this might help or not?
Who knows? I mean, future is fluid, right? Luckily, U of L is holding my job for me, so they're gonna, they've kind of guaranteed that yes, when I return from Fulbright next July, I'll be able to step back into my study abroad advising job, which is awesome. I'm so thankful for that. But after that, who knows? I'd like to stay in international education because I think it's so important and just my passion in general. So whether that be staying at U of L as a study abroad advisor, being a director somewhere, working for the State Department.
Thanks for listening to U of L Today with Mark Hebert, and go Cards.